Coming to you direct from the nerve center of the galaxy's greatest comic. This is the 2000 AD Thrillcast.
Alright, fellow athletes, and welcome to the second part of our epic interview with former editor of 2000 AD, Kelvin Gosnell. Hope you enjoyed the last episode. If you haven't listened to that one, please do go back and make sure you catch up before continuing. This week, we talked to him about some of the forgotten figures from the dawn of 2000 AD, as well as the origins of Tharg and his work on the stainless steel rat. But before we crack on, I've got a couple of little announcements to make. You may remember that a while ago we ran a competition to win a year's subscription to 2000 AD. Well, the Rando Selector bot has dipped its claw into the hat and pulled out the entry by Lewis Trickett. Congratulations to Lewis, who will be getting a year's free supply of 2000 AD. And we'll be having more competitions as we go into 2018. Also, if you're a subscriber to the 2000 AD Thrill Mail, then you would have seen that Prog 2073, the jumping on prog for the beginning of this year, is now available to pre-order from 2000ad.com. Make sure you head along and either pre-order from our web store or talk to your local comic book store about ordering a copy. All new stories, perfect for new and lapsed readers to jump on board. I've had a read. It's very, very good. So ensure that you don't miss out, Earthlet. Jump on board with the galaxy's greatest comic. Now, with those out of the way, let's get back on to talking to Kelvin Gosnell. And we kick off this episode with some of his memories of the people you don't normally hear about being involved in the creation of 2000 AD, like John Shepard. One thing I did want to ask you about, and this is a little bit left field.
Yeah.
What was John Shepard like?
Oh, she was lovely.
Right.
I'm so upset to hear that she died, because I was thinking that it was about time I got in touch with some of the old faces. Mm-hmm. And then the Irish chap, what's his name, David MacDonald told me, and I was very, very, very upset because she was a good friend. She was as straight as an arrow, and would tell you exactly what she thought. Right. Whether it was me or Kev or Pat Mills, she'd tell you. If she thought you were talking a lot of bollocks, she would tell you. Great artist. I understand that she was a very good finished artist, but I never saw any of her work because you didn't. You know, she was there to do modelling work and to design logos and stuff like that. She's a great logo designer.
She designed the Judge Dredd logo.
Yes, that's right, yeah. And the original 2000 one, I think. Or was that Doug? Can't remember now. But she was so lovely to work with. Absolutely daffy, because she was a heavy smoker like me. And you'd have your little pot of water and your ashtray. And the number of times that the fag went in the little pot of water and the brush went in the ashtray. No, a lovely girl. Very, very, very attractive woman. And just, she was great to work with. And as I said, I just like people to be honest with me. And Jane was nothing if not honest. She was straight as a bloody die. And encouraged me to do things. Like a little bit of artwork, you know, just retouching and stuff like that. A sad loss.
Yeah. Because she always struck me as one of those slightly forgotten figures. Because she was ubiquitous within...
Yeah, but because she was part of the old school, you see. Yeah. She was lumped together as old school, not willing to look at new ideas and stuff like that, which was absolute bollocks because she was more than willing to look at new ideas. She really got behind 2000 AD. And as far as I could tell, liked doing it, you know.
No, I was sad when she died because she was somebody that I would have liked to have.
Now, did you never meet her? No. I mean, and the curious thing is, I've not been able to find this out, but her maiden name, Shepard was her married name. Her maiden name was Evenden, which is not a very common name. And our old chief sub on the People newspaper was Chris Evenden, about the same age. And I believe they both got evacuated during the war. It could have been that they were brother and sister. Right. But now with both of them dead, I shall never find out. But this business is full of bizarre, complicated coincidences like that. Absolutely incredible. No, I would very much like to have seen her, but tain't to be. Deirdre Vine was a sub-editor on 2000, taken on about the same time as Landau, and I had trouble having her as a sub because people were saying, well, she's a woman. I said, well, yes, I did notice this. Not completely blind. But they said, well, women aren't sub-editors on boys' mags. And I said, well, why not? So we took her on. It didn't actually work out. I think she saw it more as a way of getting into the magazines, right, and did very well. She went on to become editor of Woman's Journal, I think it was. Okay. Yeah.
But you're saying that she had a...
Yeah, Jo Anderson was her. There was a shot that we needed for a cover. And I got the camera with a very long lens on it and with a snap of her from when she didn't know, and gave the snap to Brian Boland and said, make Anderson look like that. So she is the former editor of Woman's Journal now. I'm surprised that nobody knows that, we had a female sub.
It may have passed me by. Because the general story is that she was inspired by Debbie Harry. Is that early?
Could be.
That early strip does look a bit like Debbie Harry. One last sort of specific question I want to ask before we move on to kind of post-2080 stuff. When we were doing the roundtable on a previous episode of the podcast, when we were talking about Star-Lord, we were talking about Star-Lord himself. And how every comic needed a fictional editor, and we in the Christmas issue just gone, we did a kind of whatever happened to Star-Lord tale. Spoilers for anybody who's not read it, but basically the whole setup is shown to have been a radicalisation and recruitment for of children for an intergalactic war. So you literally see them skateboarding to their deaths, kind of thing.
Oh dear.
You've been through the process of creating Tharg for 2000 AD. What process did you go through for creating Star Wars?
Very simple process.
Yeah.
I did what John Sanders told me to. He said, dear boy, you're going to have a new magazine called Star-Lord, right, and the editor will be a man called Star-Lord who is the master of the universe. Yeah, John, all right, fine. Okay, I'll go and do that. That's basically what it was. I hated the idea, to be honest. All I can remember about Star-Lord was he wore a bloody cloak.
Yes, yeah.
You did wear a cloak, didn't he?
Yeah, kind of KP thing. Because coming back to what we were saying about 2000 AD having a voice and having like a central concept, so much of that seems to be encapsulated in Tharg.
Yeah,
the brashness of it, that is fine. Okay.
Is that broke?
It's the cards fall, but that one's still going. Yeah. The brashness of it, the imperiousness, the kind of in-your-face nature of Tharg. With Star-Lord, it seemed weaker.
It was just something that.
But from what you're saying, you weren't as all the way through. You weren't as invested as you been before.
Again, it was stories that interested me.
Yeah,
it was stories that were important. If the head honcho wants some geezer wearing a cloak and being the master of the universe to be the editorial character, it's wrong, but it's not getting in the way of the stories, so go with it.
I get you. Let's go back to the period that we were just talking about. Now, the thing that, as you said, the thing that inspired you to write that memo about 2000 AD was Star Wars. 2000 launched 3 months before Star Wars came out.
Mm-hmm.
February 1977. Star Wars was out in May, I believe.
God, was it?
I think so. Might have to edit that bit out as well.
I thought it was late. I thought it was 78, but...
No, it was definitely 77.
Yeah.
Were you pleased? Did you feel vindicated by the success of Star Wars? The fact it became such a big thing?
Never thought about it.
Because being ahead of the curve in any kind of publishing is an achievement.
Yes, yeah. I don't know how to answer that. I suppose I did. I was personally, I was pleased that Star Wars was a success.
Yeah.
Not just because we launched 2000 AD on. Well, you can't really launch on the back of something when you come out before it does. But that not just because it was Star Wars with all the big rocket ships and stuff, but because it was science fiction, and it had worked. And I could see, given the amount, that the money they'd spent on it, and how good it was for the time, I could see that it was going to make science fiction a thing again. And I'm really keen that science fiction should be. And science fiction is as big a misnomer as steampunk is. I love steampunk stories, but I hate what they're called. Science fiction need not really be about science. I mean, The Invisible Man is one of the great science fiction stories, but there's no science in it. This guy just happens to become invisible. Similarly, I'm just reading at the moment another Wells thing, The Sleeper Wakes. No science in it, but it's regarded as science fiction. It's very, very imaginative writing that makes you think about stuff. And to go back to the success of Star Wars, anything, I've said before to other people, anything that makes somebody look up to this big dark thing called sky at night when it's clear and look at these little points of light and wonder what they are and what's interesting about them and what makes them work and will we ever get to them and work out how big a light year is. Anything that makes somebody do that is a brilliant thing as far as I'm concerned. If 2000 AD has made half a dozen kids look up and wonder what that red one is in the early evening and work out that it's Mars, or what the really, really bright blue one is in the early morning, that's Venus. Brilliant. Done my job. Happy.
I mean, that's interesting, because 2000 AD, as we've already kind of discussed, it's not that kind of pure science fiction. It's science fiction action, it's science fiction horror, it's science fiction whatever.
Cowboy.
I mean, I know what my opinion is on this, but is that the key to its success, that it can be anything it wants to be, just with a bit of a science fiction edge? Because over the last 40 years, we've pretty much covered every genre that you could possibly go.
Yeah, but the only thing that they didn't do when I was there was the sword and sorcery thing, which I'm pleased about. So, I mean, I am of that generation in which, if you've read Lord of the Rings, you've done it.
Yeah.
You don't want to do any more. And I can't understand this George R.R. Martin thing. What's it called?
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
My kids are mad on it. I've tried watching a bit of it. I know people who've been in it, for Christ's sake. You know, I know actors who've worked in it. But just does nothing for me. I've done Lord of the Rings. Tolkien did it great. I've tried reading. I've tried looking. Just sword and sorcery does just nothing for me. But, back to your question, was it the fact that it could be all things to all men? Its success, it was part of it, I suppose. The real key to its success was the quality of the stories and accompanying that, the quality of the artwork. You look at that first edition of 2000, I say you had Blasco, you had effectively Carlos Esquerra, you had Bellardino. They're all great artists in their own right, as well as being damn good at telling stories. But it was the quality, that was it, was quality of everything. even down to the lettering. I mean, I don't know whose decision it was to go back to hand lettering. 2000 was the first modern comic to use hand lettering. And having seen the difference, I mean, that's the thing that I really, really loved. And so did Jan, incidentally, because there's just so much more creativity and you can do so many things that Aronio machine letters thing just can't, you know.
Let's talk a little bit about Tharg.
The mighty one.
I think Pat refers to the birth of Tharg as sort of ranting conversations, lots of swearing and cursing, and refusal to have like this kind of cosy "hello, children" kind of thing.
Yeah.
What's your memory of the creation of the Mighty One?
Well, we came down to a pair of choices. Either it was going to be a computer. It was going to give you computer language, or it should be an alien. And Pat, I remember saying to me, go and ask people like Mavis Miller on Julian School Friend, and ask everybody you can find which they prefer. And I knew that I wanted it to be Tharg. But even Mavis, she was a lovely editor. She was really, really good at what she did. Even Mavis said, no, go for the alien. So we did. Then we had to decide what he looked like. And I think Kev and I came up with the idea of going to Bermans and Nathan's, which is the theatrical costumier, and get something science fiction-y looking. And what we got was a suit from Space, 1999.
Right.
And then we wanted to... And on the way there, I think, we happened to pass another theatrical shop which had the Neanderthal mask, because Tharg's head is actually a Neanderthal mask. Very, very uncomfortable to wear, may I add. And then we had a word with Gina, who was one of the art girls, and she had a hairpiece which we stuck on with some drawing pins, and the Stone of Sirius Sapphires, which was an old cheap piece of costume jewellery that was hung on his head. Just did a photo shoot in the studio, and I was Tharg. I am the original Mighty One. And I had great fun doing it, I must say. Yeah. But the language as well, you see.
This is what I was going to ask about, because...
Has that come out? Anyone know the story of this?
Go on.
No, well, first of all, I must mention that he comes from Beetlejuice, right? Beetlejuice 6, I think it is.
Yeah.
And here picks up another piece of real science that we put in. It's got to be Beetlejuice 6, because Beetlejuice in Orion is a red giant. So it can't be Beetlejuice 3, because it would boil. So we had to make it number 6 in the planets.
Yeah.
But the Thargian, Splendix, and all that stuff goes right back to St Olave's School. The school was a huge old Edwardian place, which had a massive hall, about 200 foot long and 50, 70 foot wide. And around the top of it, and it was this huge vaulted ceiling, around the top was a balcony, which the headmaster used to use to walk back to his study, which was on one side of the hall. And it's not going to sound good in a radio interview, but it was one of those you had to be there moments. When we were sitting down on the floor, on the tables in the hall, if Oaf, the headmaster was always known as Oaf, regardless of who it was, the headmaster was Oaf, would walk along, and then you would pretend to cough in a manner like, Oaf! Like that. And he would try and find out who did it. Or you would go, you'd just make stupid kid noises like, Yantambrota. Just really stupid little boy jokes. And all of, the early Thargisms were based on that.
Right.
Splendid.
Splendid verse 3.
Yeah. Splendid. We would shout these silly words out to annoy the headmaster. And that is where Thargian comes from. What's the other one?
I mean, at the same time, curse you, because we still have to use this stuff. Like when I start this podcast, I say Borak Thumb.
Yeah, well, that was a pure Ophrism, that one.
Right.
Boring. He used to get so annoyed, he'd go bloody ape shit. We could never find out who it was. I think he put all of us in detention once just for doing that. Well, he might have whacked a lot of us, yeah. But that all comes from St Ives.
Right.
And I am sorry, listeners, it is not very funny. It really is. You had to be there moment, but we thought it was good.
If you look at the fictional editors at the time, number one, it was the thing that you had. You had a fictional person who introduced everything.
Oh, God, yes.
So with Star-Lord, you had Star-Lord, poor Dave Gibbons squeezing into the Big E's costume, nearly getting blown off the top of King's Reach Tower, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's something that's endured. Like I say, we don't use it all the time.
No.
But it's still an intrinsic... So when Tharg got taken away in the 90s, there was a huge uproar. Did you not know?
No. See, once I got into newspapers, I was just gone. It's a different world. It takes you over.
Yeah.
I never realised that 2000 AD was such a success until I was on the production floor of the Daily Mirror one night. And something they had a lot of young compositors there, young lads about 20, 30, who were of the age to be readers of 2000 AD. And something went wrong. And I said something like, oh, bleeding Skrotniks and Borax. And 3 or 4 heads turned round. What did you say? I said, bleeding Skrotniks. I said, what do you know about 2000 AD? I said, I'm Tharg, mate. And I was a celebrity. And I can't believe it. And so that was the first that I knew, because the newspapers, particularly newspapers, take you over completely.
Right.
So I had no idea that it was going. But to remove the Mighty One, that's just not done.
Well,
Al Grant has got a lot to answer for as well.
Really?
Yeah. He did more with the later development of the Mighty One than anyone earlier on.
What was it that appealed to him about it then?
I don't know. I mean, Aln 1, the robot character that he became. I mean, you could do it. Oh, God. I want rights on this if it becomes a TV serial. But you could do a TV serial of all those characters, couldn't you? Maybe the It crowd already has. I don't know. No, it was good because, as you say, the earlier characters had always been Mr. Comfy Cozy. I mean, I wrote for Valiant, the Airfix Modelers Club for God knows how many ages, and on to Battle as well. That meant every week pretending to be Dick Emery and writing it, Oh God. I quite liked Dick Emery. For his time, he was a good comedian. But having to write as someone else all the time, not good. Yeah. One thing I must mention before we forget was, has the whole Skrotnik thing ever come out?
Well, so you explain.
Well, Jerry Finley Day was one of our writers, and it was always a joke that he'd had a stroke and he didn't know it because he was the world's worst typist. He'd throw his fingers at the typewriter and hope they hit the right keys. And you could never work out what he meant sometimes. And on one of the invasion stories that he was doing, we got a scene description that read, "Savage and men, Skrotnik captives across plain." Now, Skrotnik's a really good word, but we couldn't work. And Pat and I sat down for ages until one of us, I think it was him, said, "It's escorting. It's a typographical error for escorting." But we thought it was such a good word. We'll pick it up. So we started to use it as a general term of approbation or term of praise in the Judge. I think, "Gee, Judge, we think you're really Skrotnik." And it went on and on being used, and it was written on the Berlin Wall. There is now a typeface called Skrotnik, and it's just one of my ambitions to see it in the English dictionary saying Skrotnik, a general term of approbation, brackets, from a typing error by Jerry Finley Day, close brackets. It's just fun.
What was your relationship with Pat like?
Well, I always thought it was quite good. I enjoyed working for him. I had the greatest respect for him. It was very, very challenging. But that's good. You need to be challenged in this business. And I thought he was a great co-worker, and I just loved working with and for him. But with all the years that have passed, I seem to have become the villain of the piece. I don't know why. And he accused me of being a reductionist or something. Accused me of being not quite fully open with the truth, of trying to pretend that I did everything on 2000 AD. I think this dates back to some interviews that I did with a guy called Bishop, was it? Kiwi? Yeah. When Bishop came down to my house and asked me what I'd done for 2000 AD, and I told him what I had done. He didn't ask me what Pat had done or what it was like to work with him. So I told him that, and it was taken that I was trying to claim all credit for 2000, which I never was. Well, it seems to have soured, rather badly. But I loved working for him. It was a tremendous challenge, and I think we together did some great work.
Because it was quite an intimate team, really, wasn't it? Because it was you and Pat and Kevin and
Jan
and Jan
and Doug in close orbit around the outside.
And to be in that kind of intensive work environment with these people, I guess that's the kind of environment that either produces lifelong friends or you never want to see them again. Kind of thing.
Well, I thought I had a lifelong friend in Pat, but apparently I hadn't. I never once had cause to moan about the pressures he put you under. It was good. It was pushing you like hell to try and go this 115, 120% to find the different angle, the better piece of dialogue. And it was bloody hard work. I mean, we're doing 14, 15, 16-hour days. And it wasn't easy, but I loved it.
You'd sent Prog 1 off to the printers at Christmas 76.
Oh God, yes.
So I mean that gives you an idea. It gives us an idea of just how much time you had between putting something to bed and it going on the shelf.
Yeah, it was Kevin.
That's not a lot of space.
No, it certainly wasn't. Two things there.
Yeah.
Kevin and I went down to see the print run. I've seen the print run of the first edition of 2000 AD, and it was on a 3-tier letterpress, which was a thing you would not believe. You talk about steampunk, this was steampunk. It was 3 stories high, made out of cast iron, looked like it had been designed by Brunel, and it was so old and old. It was letterpress, which is a piece of metal whizzing around on a great big roller, hitting a piece of paper. And they make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And so it was over 3 decks, and it was so old, it could only do one form of colour. So you had the centre spread in colour and the front and back covers in colour.
Yeah.
If the colour ink ran low, there was a man who had to climb up to the top with 3 buckets of ink and pour them into a hopper. And we saw this happening while the whole machine was shaking. It was just incredible, just quite incredible, down at Gravesend. That brings up another thing completely unrelated, but really quite interesting, in that one of the reasons that IPC had to keep doing the comics was to keep those presses turning. Because you've got an idle press, you're losing money.
Yeah.
They want those presses to be turning 24 hours a day. And one of the reasons that they did comics was because they were easy to bung on these ancient letterpress things. I remember getting in trouble with Star-Lord when the then publisher, his name escapes me, not John Sanders, but the guy who was working for him, I was talking to him and said that with the nature of Star-Lord, we could do with going into offset printing, which gave you much better quality colour and everything like that. And we went ahead like that because if he told Sanders didn't remember. And when he saw the bills come in for the offset printing, and the fact that the presses wouldn't be used, brown stuff hit the fan in a very big way. But one of the reasons for making comics was to keep those presses turning.
Wow. But with you taking over as editor of 2000 AD, did Pratt completely remove himself?
Do you know, I can't remember. I think very soon afterwards, I think he did. Also, became sort of part-time. I really can't remember. The one thing that I do remember quite clearly about becoming, in quotes, editor, was Sanders called me down and told me that this was what was going to happen. Didn't ask me, he told me. And at the same time as he told me I was editor of 2000 AD, he told me to launch Star-Lord. Right. He said, and at the same time, dear boy, you will start working on a new magazine called Star-Lord, which will be the same sort of thing, you know, make it up yourself. And I remember thinking, but it's not a good idea. Just get on with it, dear boy, off you go. And I staggered up the floor from Sanders' office to get a coffee and bumped into Pat outside the coffee machine. So I remember all the little details and told him about this. And I was saying that I thought it was a bag of shit and not a very good idea. And he agreed. It was wrong because we wanted to put, as I've said earlier, all our efforts and creativity and everything into making 2000 AD and its stories work. And to start producing the next sausage in the magazine sausage factory was not the right way of doing it.
I mean, you've described Star-Lord as one of the biggest mistakes of your life.
They've been worse. There were some good stories in it, but it should not have been done. All our efforts should have gone into 2000 AD. And just imagine what it would have been like then, when science fiction was so new, it was so popular, it was you know, the desired stuff to have. If we'd started producing on what we wanted to do on the European comic way, to collect everything at the end of the year and make an album of it, so that at the end of year one you'd have a Judge Dredd album, you'd have a Dan Dare album, which you would sell back to back with the new one coming out, like they did on Epo magazine. Every year they would put out 2 pages of Storm with Don Lawrence every week. At the end of that year, they would collect all of those, it would be 2 stories, into an album and sell it for an inflated price, which 2000 AD is doing now and has been doing for some time. But we wanted to do it 40 years ago. Yeah. And it would have worked. It would have worked.
I mean, it wasn't until Nick Landau founded Titan, and started doing the graphic novels of the 2000 AD stuff that actually became a thing. Because, like you say, prior to that, nobody thought it was...
No, 2000 AD, IPC could have done it. But that was one of the bad things. That was the bit of bureaucracy you couldn't kick. You know, we were a sausage machine magazine factory, and nobody was going to produce a Chateaubriand out of it.
One of the things that often comes up is the way that original artwork was treated by IPC.
Holds head in horror. Yeah, it was pretty bad. I cannot mention any names, but all of the original Hampson Dan Dare disappeared. So did a lot of other stuff. I don't know what's happened to the 2000 AD stuff. I know that I've got 2 bits of it. I've got Ian Kennedy's wonderful drawing of a Vulcan flying past the window of my office, and I've got a spread of Carlos Esquerra from the wonderful Waterworks spread from Stront, I think it's Strontium Dog, right. Which he gave to me because he owned it. That was one of the things that slipped through the rights hole that I made. But that's the only 2 bits that I've got, other than little personal sketches that people have done for me, like Bellardinelli and what have you. But a lot of the stuff must have gone missing. I'm sure of it. Stuff did. That was one thing that really fucking annoyed me, something terrible. Stuff which 2000 AD fans would love to see and know about, like the original Tharg head.
Yeah.
That was nicked. There was a brilliant model of Rojaws, Hammerstein, sorry, done by a friend of Kevin's who was an effects technician, worked on Alien. Yeah, worked on Alien. And he made a perfect model of Hammerstein, all moving bits and everything, lights. That was nicked. Our excusometer went. That was a beautiful. I wish that I had that. That was so great.
For those people who don't know what, because I know what it is.
Yeah, and the excusometer started very early on when we used to get excuses from people as to why the artwork hadn't arrived, and they went up on a big sheet of A2 on the wall with name of artist, nature of excuse, and then rating for believability. And then rating for creativity on the part of the artist. And it was, well, I've mentioned one already, Blasco, Invasion, Want to Draw Bible, 7 and 5. Then one you met, Vanya, I think that was Invasion, Cat Died, brackets, again, close brackets, 5 and 6. And it was... grandmother poisoned, all sorts of...
Didn't someone's grandmother die 3 times or something?
Yeah, grandma died. The third time, that's right, yeah.
So, 2000 AD is rightly lauded because it was the first comic to properly give credit to artists with a credit box, which I believe was Kevin's thing.
Yeah.
Didn't ask permission.
No, I got in trouble for that. Yeah. Kevin came up with the idea of doing that. The pressure was there to do it. I forget from whom, probably Pat, probably John... certainly from Kev, because all the American artists and writers got this. I thought it was a great idea for reasons that I'll come back to, because I'd been doing something, even before 2000 AD, I'd been trying to do something with rights and royalties and at least acknowledging the creators of the stories. And Kev came up with the idea for the credit boxes. I saw... Again, my naivety came into play. I couldn't see any problem with it. Slapped them on, and about 3 issues were printed with them. And then the first of those became available, and John Sanders saw it and went absolutely ballistic about it. You can't do this, dear boy. Well, why not, John? We have done. And I remember a long argument with him. And in the end, he gave in. That's oversimplifying matters, but that's the way it went. I didn't see anything wrong with it. These are the people that have written, drawn, and lettered the story. There's a great deal of... I mean, you wouldn't put out a paperback without saying who wrote it. Artists sign their work. What's the problem? I see now it's because it was a step towards... allowing the writers and after the creators to have some financial interest in the ongoing use of their work, not just being paid once and that's it, goodbye. I was interested because long before 2000 AD, when the first scripts I did, I think, were probably for Pat. Yeah. So I was kind of a little bit involved, but I was always... have been and still am an enthusiastic member of the National Union of Journalists, the NUJ, and I wanted to try and get something done about getting at least some copyright payments for the creators. And I remember going to a number of NUJ meetings, and the person who was in charge of it was what was her name? Peter Vandenberg. And she was, associate something or other. And because one of the female group editors, the girls group editors, Wilf Brigmore, who was the editor of Tammy and became editor of Ginty and all sorts of stuff. He was with me, and he was of the same mind. And we went to these meetings and argued our case. And this Vandenberg woman said, "Oh, but they're just picture strips. Why? But how can we give royalties for people that just write bubbles?" And explained how difficult it is to write a bloody picture strip. You know, it's like writing a half-hour. If you're writing a half-hour TV show, you've got 30 minutes and thousands of words and everything to do. If you're writing a 3-page picture strip, you've got 3 pages, and that's generally about 20 pictures. To tell the same length of story, it's a damn sight harder. But the NUJ, in the form of Ms. Vandenberg, didn't want to know. And I kind of became a bit disinterested in the union at the time, or rather a bit pissed off with them, to be honest. But rights and royalties and getting the rights for the creators has always been something that I've wanted to do. And I got a little bit of success with it. Not much, but it sowed the seeds. Do the writers with 2000, do they now get royalties on their stuff?
Yeah.
So it's not just first use?
No.
Good, I am so pleased that that's finally happened. After 40 years, can't be that bad.
Well, it's interesting with the archive stuff that we're doing, because we have a graphic novel line called The Treasury of British Comics. So we printed Misty, One-Eyed Jack, Leopard from Lime Street, Faceache, we've done a first collection of.
Oh, the artist must be gone, isn't he?
Yeah.
What was his name?
Ken Mead.
Ken Mead.
Died in the early 90s, I think.
Oh, Faceache was the most popular thing in all of the comics amongst the staff. You could not wait for, it was Buster, wasn't it? Yeah, couldn't wait for Buster.
Buster and Jet.
Yeah, couldn't wait for Buster to come round to see what he'd done, because it was so utterly brilliant. It's just wonderful.
I mean, the point is that a lot of the creators who are still with us, and obviously their estates, are going to get royalties on this stuff for the first time ever.
Yeah.
You know, but let's talk about Star-Lord, because you've already kind of touched on it. No sooner had you successfully launched 2000 AD, then you get lumbered with the next one. It wasn't a job that you wanted to do. With things like the offset printing, with more colour, glossier paper, better quality paper, let's put it that way.
Ish, yeah.
Better
it was the same, I think it was the same paper, just that the offset process was heat set, so it looked a bit better.
Right, there you go. Was that you trying to make a fist of it, make it something different to what else was out there?
Well, it was one of the things that ramping up the quality of stock paper and the quality of printing was something that we always discussed and always wanted to see. Kevin was particularly keen on this, and we would try to argue to get 2000 AD up to an offset press, but it wasn't going to happen because we had to keep good old. It was number 3, I think. Yeah, that was the name of the press. The steampunk press down at Gravesend. Good old Fleetway number 3. We had to keep that turning. But with Star-Lord, we got the chance to have a go at using offset, and I think we used it rather well. It can be very expensive. It's cheaper now because you've got computer setting and all. You've almost got AI working some of the bloody presses these days. But in those days, if you wanted to do a line of stars as a border, somebody had to sit down and cut out little bits of paper in the form of stars, colour them up, and then stick them on a piece of translucent paper and have them shot 3 times to get the right colour. Now you just go to Quark Express or whatever they use these days and say, give me stars. You go, dink, done. It was a very expensive way of printing something. But it's, as you've said, I've said that Star-Lord was the biggest mistake. Well, I wouldn't say it was a mistake because it launched some really brilliant characters.
Yeah.
They only got done because in the initial stages, because I was able to offer the rights and royalties to the artists, Like Pat, I don't think would have done Roadbusters if he had not, albeit only for a very temporary period, been given his copyright interest in the characters. But as I've said, Sanders took that away after about 3 or 4 editions. But let's see. As I say, it's difficult to remember all the details because I'm working on 3 damn things at the same time. Strontium Dog was Star-Lord, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So the big names in Star-Lord were Roadbusters and Stront. I'm trying to think what else was in it. Time Wars?
There was Mind Wars.
That was Al Hebden, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But the 2 big ones to come out of that were Roadbusters and the Stront.
Yeah.
And Strontium Dog particularly suited that offset process.
Yes.
And Carlos, with his use of colour, was just so brilliant. All done with felt tips. How do you do that? Brilliant, man.
Because he'd been working on Battle quite a lot. Because he co-created Joe's Dread, John, and walked away from the character because Mick's episode had been
put in front of his, only because of the morality of the original first one.
And so he'd gone off to work on Elmer's Tizo for Battle with Alan.
Lovely story.
How did you get him onto Strontium Dog?
Seriously, I don't fully remember. This silence may have to be edited out. I really cannot fully remember. I just know that, as I think I remember, he'd seen the script, or I'd mentioned it to him, or John had mentioned it to him, and he liked the character.
Right.
There was an element of El Mestizo about it, I suppose, and it was offering him, as I see it, something new and different and challenging and dynamic to do.
Because he, when I interviewed him in Spain, he referred to Johnny Alpha as his son. That's the character that he seems to have the most affection for. And love for,
Yeah. When you saw him, did he mention Slippery Jim, the Grizz? Because he was so mad keen to do that. I could not believe it. This was something, again, slightly off subject, but...
let's talk about Stainless Steel Rat.
Yeah.
Because, it's interesting, that it was a licensed strip. It was an adaptation of
Harrison's original.
Harrison's original. Number one, why?
Because I love the Stainless Steel Rat.
Number two, how did that go down with the superiors?
Not very well at all. However, at the time, there had been... Sanders had built up the pyramid of sackable people under him and had put in Bob Bartholomew as managing editor or associate managing something or other editor of the boys' titles, which meant that I was responsible to him. It just so happened that Bob Bart knew Harry Harrison because Harry had written... I think I got these details right. He had written certain episodes of The Phantom Patrol for Eagle, which was about a World War II tank landing craft that had got lost in time and used to wash up in all sorts of historical places and have adventures. It's rather like the Technicolor Time Machine, which is another brilliant, brilliant Harry Harrison story, which so should have been made into a film and hasn't. We'll leave... Google it, chaps. Google it. You'll find it's really good. Bob Bart knew Harry, and I just happened to mention that I would love to do the Stainless Steel Rat in 2000 AD. And he said, "Oh, I know Harry. I'll ask him." So I let him get on with it, and it worked. How he got it past Sanders, I don't know. But buying a character use like that And I got to meet Harry Harrison, one of my childhood heroes. Wonderful, wonderful character. A great Anglophile. Even though he was American, he loved the English. Couldn't live in England because of the tax, so lived in Southern Ireland. But came over here and was an English gent when he came in. He had the club in the West End, you know, and we used to go there to have steak and kidney pudding with it. It was wonderful, and he liked what I did, and he gave me freedom to do little bits of my own in there, like saying in one of them, there's a line that he didn't write, which was, "You'll never take me alive, copper." Aside, I've always wanted to use that line, readers. And he thought it was great. Yeah. But we did little stuff like that. And I don't think I can't remember if I had Carlos in mind as the artist for it, but I mentioned it to him and he jumped at it because he'd loved the character when he'd read it. Yeah. It comes back again to what you mentioned earlier. One of the things that I had wanted to do was to serialise stuff that hadn't been made into films. I mean, The Rat had been optioned by Hollywood so many times, but never done. Has had Bill the Galactic Hero. That's another one that so screams out to be made into a picture strip or a film. Or Technicolor Time Machine, which is one of the funniest, most amusing, pleasurable science fiction stories you'll ever come across. But I wanted to do that, to take some classic sci-fi and put it into strip. And the Rat, I believe, worked very well. And I couldn't believe how keen Carlos was to do it.
Because it's one that seems to retain quite a fondness amongst it. So every day on the 2000 AD Facebook page and Twitter account, we put the classic cover. And whenever it's one of Carlos's stainless steel Rat covers, there's always a lot of reaction to it.
Really?
Yeah, lots of people saying they remember it and you know, bring him back.
It's difficult because you run out of books.
Well, quite. Well, as somebody who had read them and enjoyed them and loved them, doing an adaptation.
I'm just thinking of the plot that I'd do. Yeah.
Right.
Well, because he did this thing. Harry did the thing with. Oh no, it wasn't The Rat. It was Bill the Galactic Hero, where the British sci-fi fantasy writer Moorcock does it as well. He allows other people to write his stuff.
Kind of like, yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
But he did that with, it wasn't The Rat, he's only done 4 or 5 Rat stories. One was a prequel, which was not very good. But he did it with Bill the Galactic Hero, and that went really badly wrong. Bill the Galactic Hero is a one-shot story finish. It shouldn't have tried to stretch it. But, I mean, you could have done it with... Ooh, I can see that. Wow. Yeah.
But as a fan, what was it like for you to be able to do that? Well, you know, you got to meet him.
It was the most enjoyable work I did, even though all you're doing is adapting. You're not coming up with the story.
Yeah.
You're directing it. You know, somebody's given you a script, and you are being the director, giving it to your production crew, the artist, to work out. I mean, it's not quite as delineated as that, but I felt like a film director doing that. It was brilliant. That, to me, curiously, is how I got into comic strips in the first place. Because, as I said, I'd been doing the competitions, went to Action to do a competition with them, got talking to Pat, and with his enormous enthusiasm, said, why aren't you writing scripts? Why aren't you doing this? I said, well, nobody's ever asked me. He said, write me a script. Well, what have you got? And he said, Suicide Club, which was a story about First World War aviation on the Western Front. And I had a perfect story for it to do with a Bristol fighter aeroplane which was being used badly. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do to prove that this aeroplane should be used differently. I knew what the characters were going to do. Couldn't work out the pictures. Could not work out what's this picture going to be. Oh, God, don't know. And then something in me said, what if it was a film? What if you were making it as a film? Yeah. And I'm quite a good photographer, or have been since I was a kid, and I'm interested in photography and moving pictures because I had one of the little electric cine cameras. And I thought, okay, if I was doing it like a film, I'd do it like this, bang, 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 bang. Wrote the damn thing in about 3/4 of an hour.
Right.
And Jeff Kemp said that they were shocked because it was the only story that Pat Mills ever bought that he didn't change anything of. And I think whether it ever got done or not, I don't know, because they dropped the Suicide Club.
Right.
They decided it wasn't a good idea to use. But that, again, with The Rat and other stuff, you're right. The way I write stories is to see it as though you're making a film.
Yeah. Let's come back to Star-Lord.
Yep.
It lasted 33 issues, something like that. Can you remember when you were told it was going to merge?
No, I can remember nothing about that. Because at the time I was then ramping up Modern Rot, Tornado. But I think it was well known that the one thing that I do remember, I was pleased that we weren't going to push 2000 AD into Star-Lord to make it Star-Lord and 2000 AD.
Well, I mean, that's something that gets mentioned in Thrill Power Overload is, I can't remember who it was. Is it John Sanders? Or was it somebody else? I can't remember. Said they did it that way round on a hunch. They'd been minded, apparently, to fold 2000 AD into Star-Lord. They decided, no, let's do it the other way around. So there's this kind of a bullet dodged for 2000 AD at the time. But you say you were glad it was going to be that way around.
Yeah, well...
was that because you didn't want to end up editing what it became?
Any magazine editor... creator will tell you that a good magazine develops a character of its own. It becomes like a person you work with, a friend. 2000 AD was that.
Yeah.
It was bloody good. It had its own strong, powerful personality. Star-Lord didn't. 2000 AD was better, despite its crappy printing process and everything else. I don't ever remember being asked or told that it was going to be 2000 AD and Star-Lord. It just seemed natural that that's the way it should be, because 2000 AD was still going strong, but Star-Lord wasn't.
Yeah.
And it was losing money because of the offset. The offset printing being more expensive than Fleetway's No. 3 letterpress machine. That's the way I understood it, anyway.
And while you'd been working on Star-Lord, you'd handed a lot of the editorial duties on 2000 AD over to Kevin and Nick Landau.
Yeah.
How did that relationship? Were you still keeping an eye on?
I tried,
right.
And it was because of having to work on 3 titles at the same time that I was not keeping as close an eye as I would like to have done. You needed, with 2000 AD, because of the action debacle that had gone on really only 9 months or so before this, you had to be very careful. Every single page had to be read and every single frame had to be looked at to say, is anyone going to have us on this? And that's what nearly happened with 2000 AD. The story Inferno, I think it was, which was a game story or something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't know exactly because I had to leave it all to the others. That went over the top. And they were going to close 2000 AD. Bob Bartholomew said, we're going to close it. And overnight, I decided that was enough. I'd had it. And the following morning, I went into John Sanders and resigned and said, I can't work for this guy. He can't see that, it needs control. Yes. It needs to be very carefully nurtured. Yes. You've got to be very careful what you're doing with it, but you don't just close it because one guy makes a mistake. And it got put right anyway. But Bob wanted it closed, and I just felt that strongly about it I went and resigned. And Sanders wouldn't let me leave, but I said, I'm not going to work on those titles again because of the attitude of management.
Yeah.
And he made me into a script unit, which I, did for a few months and then got pissed off with it and went off freelance.
Right. Okay.
But it did. My resignation had its effect.
Yeah.
2000 AD kept on going.
How do you feel about that now?
About what?
About having been put in that position, essentially having no other option than to resign, but it having been the right thing to do.
It saved 2000 AD. That's the way I see it. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it would have been saved anyway. But I saw it as the final straw. I could not go on watching something that I had so much interest and emotional connection to, 2000 AD, being ruined by management and probably being stopped, killed. I had to do it. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
I did it and it seemed to work. As I say, maybe it was some other thing that I don't know anything about that stopped it being cancelled, but it seemed to me that it was my resignation that kept it going. And I'm pleased about that. It was ready for me. It was time for me to go freelance anyway. So,
all right. Just while you were on Star-Lord, Steve McManus got taken off of Battle, and I believe subbed for you on Star-Lord.
Is that the way around it worked? Yes, I think that's right. Yeah.
And then when that was effectively cancelled, he came on to 2000 AD, replacing Nick, who then moved on to.
Yes, I think that changeover may have happened a little bit earlier as a result of the Inferno thing.
Right.
And that was a great move. Steve, well, I don't know if he is an unsung hero. He's certainly a hero of 2000. Because how long did he edit it? 20 odd years or something?
Not that long, no. I think it was from that early 80s point until 87, 88, I think. But I mean, that you know, that's the golden age. That's the, you know, you get Slane, you get Nemesis, you get
wonderful job he did. Yeah. Again, I enjoyed working with him on Battle as well as on the other titles. He seemed an honest, straight, genuine bloke who liked putting in a lot of work to get a good result, and to put that amount of years in, struggling against IPC management to keep our title going. That's brilliant. Yeah. I'm a greatest respect for him.
Looking back on your time working from 2008, from having been the person who wrote that memo,
yep,
through to helping birth it, running it for those first few years, and we haven't talked about Tornado yet either. What's your feeling about it in retrospect? Is it do the positives outweigh the regrets?
Yes, I think they do. I had a great time doing it. I enjoyed myself immensely, albeit with the naivety which I'd mentioned over and over again, just bashing against something to make it work, and doing something that I enjoyed and that a lot of other thousands and thousands of people enjoyed reading. In all of my journalistic career, which is 40 odd years, I don't think, with one or two small exceptions, that I feel was slightly better than 2000 AD, one of which, as I've said, was interviewing Professor Lovelock about the Gaia theory stuff, and a couple of aviation jobs that I've done that were quite fun. 2000 AD stands out above the rest. I created or helped create something that a lot of people really, really, really liked. And again, as I've said earlier, if it made a few of them look up and wonder what those dots are and find out a bit about them, that's brilliant.
how did it change the direction of your life? What is it responsible for giving you opportunities, set you off in a direction you wouldn't normally have gone? Because I guess when you start working, you've been working in the competitions department at IPC, and then when you leave it, you go off to be a freelance writer, which is a different direction.
Very difficult question. I never thought about it. I suppose it gave me a greater belief that whatever it was, I could do it. The sort of journalism that I've done, you have to learn almost all of them, like becoming a daily newspaper writer for computer games, about which I knew nothing. I had to learn about very, very, very quickly and become an expert in them very quickly. And going to work for a defence industry magazine, knew very little about defence industry, learnt very quickly. To the extent that on 2000 AD, because of the nature of it, it being so new to me, I had to learn about comics very quick. And the broad nature of the stories, with flesh, I had to learn about dinosaurs really quickly.
Yeah.
Because you get something wrong on a dinosaur, and woomph, you're deluged with letters telling you, there's one too many spines on that Triceratops or whatever. You learn how to do stuff quick, and I suppose that is one of the things that 2000 AD helped me do. Yeah.
Okay.
And the ability to want to try anything,
Was it a unique opportunity? One thing that we've kind of touched on in the podcast in the past is how within the first 10 years of 2000 AD's existence, you went from having a British comic book industry that was shifting millions of copies every week. Entire newsstands full of new titles bubbling up and going under. Within 10 years, that had changed quite profoundly. Do you think 2000 AD was kind of like the last unique opportunity out of what had been that industry?
Yes and no. It probably was the last opportunity to do something in that old industry. But by the same token, I think it was the thing that made the change to that industry. In that, no longer... they finally worked out that the sausage machine thing wasn't working anymore. Right. Where you turn the handle and you get at one end and you get a comic out at the other for a year, and then you put that sausage in with another one and make them into a joint title. 2000 AD kind of, to me, disproved that and showed you that you could have good, long-lasting characters in their own right that would stand for a long time. How long's the Judge been going? 40 years? Even plays Roy the Rovers did as well, I suppose, but that's a different thing altogether. So yes, it was probably the last unique opportunity to do something within that old framework, but I believe it also helped change that framework at the same time.
Funny you should mention Dread. Because, as Pat's pointed out, in the early days of 2000 AD, Dread wasn't anywhere near the most popular character. It was Mac 1.
Yep. In the very, very early issues, it was coming up as Mac 1 and Flesh, I believe.
Right.
But must remember that the Judge wasn't in the first edition.
No.
He didn't come out until the second, which was a very clever idea. And that was Pat's, I think. Either Pat's or Doug's. Can't remember now. But it was a good idea because, you got them interested with the first lot and then you hit them with something just as good in the second edition. When the Judge went to the top, I can't remember. But he did emerge as the strongest character after a while. But I think it was bound to be like that with a mishmash of different things being top every week because all of it was so new and so different to what they'd seen in comics before.
It's not necessarily conforming to what has gone before. It's new stuff, it's exciting stuff, it's unusual stuff. I mean, if you think about Dredd, totalitarian future cop portrayed as hero kind of thing, you know.
I mean, Mach 1 you can understand, because that was just a lift from the $6 Million Man in its own way. Invasion was Carter. Flesh? Flesh was, again, about 6 years before its time, wasn't it, really?
There was a long tradition of mashups in kids' comics where you take one concept and another, you know,
and put them together.
Concept and mash them together.
Yeah. Dinosaurs and cowboys.
Yeah, but it's one of those mashups that absolutely 100% works first time. You go cowboys versus dinosaurs.
Why not?
Yeah. But it's with that early 2000 AD, it just seems so, I hate to use this phrase, out of the box. It kind of it appears in its own blaze of glory. Yes, it had been preceded by battle and action, not 2000 AD, but 2000 AD seemed to have that lightning in a bottle element.
Yes, it did. In every story, in its own little way, every story had its unique element that you tried to get that was a bit different. With Dan Dare, for example, going up to Jupiter. No one had done that before. You know, things that fly around that look like a bed bug and a Harrier jump jet put together. Different. Well different.
Let's talk about Dan Dare for a moment, because you mentioned in the original memo it said no Dan Dare. But this was, as I believe it was said at the time, you know, this isn't your dad's Dan, or your granddad's Dan Dare or whatever. It lasted quite a long time. You know, we've put out 2 big, thick volumes of this stuff. What was it about that? Because you did a bit of work on. I did
quite a lot of the first one. I remember doing a lot of the bloody first one, although Armstrong was credited. But as I say, it was a total rewrite job whenever it came in, and I'd rewrite it, and then Pat would rewrite it, and then blah. And I think I got credited for a number of the first one. I don't know. Perhaps it was popular and went on because it's always challenging you. Looked great. Anyway, looked brilliant. Spaceships always go down well. Funny thing is that our dad's Dan Dare would work beautifully now. So would. I've actually suggested it as a plot line to someone, but whether it'll get done or not, I don't know. Punk jet. Yeah.
It's interesting for me looking at... Sorry?
This is the whole Dan Dare thing. It would work beautifully on television. It so would. When you look at... I mean, that is the sort of idea that what we're talking about here is the same sort of thing we were talking about on 2000 AD, a different way of doing something, giving them something new. On telly, you've got lots of nostalgic stuff, like Peaky Blinders, or whatever it's called, Foyle's War, 1940s, 1950s stuff. Give us Dan Dare, but set in the 40s and 50s, with those gorgeous, big, long Art Deco spaceships to look at. It would work so well as a piece of telly. So would... Copyright line, K. Gosnell.
Well, let's talk about your relationship with writers, in not just when you're creating with Pat 2000 AD, but also as editor, because particularly those really early scripts, as you say, something like John Armstrong's Dan Dare gets rewritten by you, and then it gets rewritten by Pat. How did the writers feel about this process that was going on?
Well, you either liked it or you got out.
Right.
That's it.
A lump it.
Yeah. I can't think of any of those that got out because they maybe did one script, didn't like what was done to it, and then just never came back.
Right.
But that's the way it was. That's the way Pat worked. And as I say, you liked it or you didn't.
Tornado. Now, you've already mentioned that no sooner was Star-Lord coming to, as it turns out, the end of its life, than you were put onto creating Tornado.
Onto creating another comic.
Yeah.
Which, again, working on the basis of having a themed comic, we decided to call Heroes.
Yeah.
And that you would have a different type of hero. You'd have a war hero, a sci-fi hero, a jungle hero, whatever. And again, it was called Heroes right up to about a week before the actual launch. A week before the first edition was due to go to press. And then the board decided that Heroes was a non-title. It doesn't mean anything.
Wow.
You know, and excuse me, what was that television series called that was a big hit? And I'd been sort of half expecting this, and I wish I'd taken bets now, because I thought back, well, they're going to want something else, so what can I do? And I just thought, well, what were the old comics called? Vulcan, Victor, Valiant, Bombers, right, what's their latest bomber? Tornado, all right, let's do that. And that's where the Tornado name came from. Wow. Again, I didn't want to do it because it was wrong. It was just the sausage machine thing again. Going nowhere, just turning the handle, getting a second-rate thing out. Didn't enjoy doing it, didn't want to do it, thought it was the wrong thing. And it was one of the reasons, I guess, why I as well as saving 2000 AD, I hoped one of the reasons I wanted to get out, because it was just silly.
Mind of Wolfie Smith?
Yes. One was so busy doing stuff, doing comics at the time.
Yeah.
I'd never watched telly. I did not know that Wolfie Smith was a character on telly. And Tom Tully, the bloody writer, he was so, as I saw it, so bloody idle, he couldn't think of a new name for the character, so he just lifted it off of telly. I was so pissed off when I found out.
If you'd stayed, do you think that process would have just gone on and on and on? Or did they learn their lesson by you resigning?
Don't know. Really, no, they didn't, because they had Speed after that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Having been told that it was a narcotic substance for enjoyment, didn't seem to make any impression on them. I got to write some nice features for it, though. Went flying a couple of times, that was good. But no, I don't think it would have changed.
Right. Because that's one curio about early 2000 AD that's always fascinated me, is the relative lack of feature content. Because Star-Lord had feature content, Tornado had feature content, Tiger, Lion, Valiant all had features in it. But 2000 AD was almost always, with one or two exceptions.
Again, I think that was intentional, in that Pat decided that he didn't want stuff to get in the way of the stories.
Yeah.
It was a publication about good stories. Why put other crap in it?
Yeah. I interviewed Barry Tomlinson, who did Lion and Tiger and all that, and his way of doing comics was to tie them into the interest of the readership. So I think it was Lion. The guest editor was Eric Morecambe for Donkey's Years, and he gets sports. When he did Roy the Rovers,
I didn't know Barry had anything to do with Lion.
Was it not Lion?
I know it was Tiger.
Must have been Tiger then.
Yeah. Lion was part of the old school, the Bicknell and Jack the Grand school.
Right, that's why I'm getting confused. He started on Lion, and then went to Tiger, and then started doing sports. So with something like Tiger, you would get sports stars, you'd get celebrities.
Yeah.
Eric Morecambe guest editing an episode.
I didn't know that. No, Tiger was very much. It was Roy the Rovers was Tiger.
Yeah.
What more can one say? I am not a sports fan.
But that's that was the very old school way of doing it, and so it makes 2000 AD stick out even more. I just wanted to touch on one thing with the merge between 2000 AD and Star Wars, because we had an episode of the podcast just before Christmas where I did a round table with our editors Keith and Matt and John Freeman, who used to be an editor at Marvel UK in the 80s. But he runs a website called Down the Tube, which is like comics news. And one of the things we were talking about was what Star Wars brought to 2000 AD. On a straightforward level, you have Slanting Dog and Roadbusters.
Yeah.
But what I notice is that when Star-Lord comes in, Ant Wars ends, Robot Hunter goes on a 14-week hiatus to make way for these new strips.
Yeah.
And rereading those issues, it feels very much that this was an opportunity for 2000 AD to just refresh itself slightly. So to pause what had been going before, bring this new thing in, and then because 2000 AD after the merger is even if you ignore the two new strips, is a noticeably fresher, different thing than what had gone before it. So you start getting less of the fantastical and more of the kind of hard edge stuff, I think.
You are probably right there, and I'm thinking that's probably down to change of staff.
Right.
Stephen Warnes.
Yeah.
Bringing in his... Well, no, that's too simplistic thing to say, but I was going to say bringing in his battle experience to that. Again, far too simplistic. I think it was Steve's push that had a lot to do with that. Right. And the two stories... A number of people that have said to me that Star-Lord was their favourite title.
Yeah.
I think what they mean is that Stront and Roadbusters were their favourite stories, and they just happened to be in that book and be better printed and look better, nicer to look at. But certainly it helped refresh 2000 AD, I'm sure. So from that point of view, perhaps Star-Lord wasn't such a waste of time. One thing I would like to say, we're going back to something we were talking about very, very early on, about how different IPC was at the time with the old school. Jack LeGrand and Sid Bicknell were the pinnacle of this old school, if you like.
Yeah.
And that again picks up what you were saying about the 50s being just after the war. What people don't realise is that those two guys, now a lot of people around that time, Len Wen on Buster was as well, he was an army guy. Sid Bicknell was Royal Navy and shot down a Stuka. During the war, he's on a tank landing craft and this Stuka is coming over trying to drop his bomb at him. And instead of running for cover, Sid sat behind that little machine gun and he shot the bastard down. Jack LeGrand was a glider pilot and has faced death God knows how many times. In one of those old Horsa gliders with half a tank in the back and a few soldiers, and he drove it into a field in Arnhem and then had to fight his way back. The people were different. They'd been through that war and they got rubbished for being old stick in the muds. But there's bloody good reasons why they're old stick in the muds, because they'd been through that. And it's a thing that tends to get lost. The 50s was full of people like that. Some of them actually were John Smith, the artist on 2000 AD. Is it John Smith?
No, he's a writer.
No, who am I thinking of then? Well, one of them was a Spitfire pilot during the war.
Ron Smith, yeah.
Ron Smith, yeah. He drove Mark 19s during the war. Had a great time.
I did want to ask about that period where you were on Star-Lord and therefore not able to pay as much attention to 2000 AD as you may have wanted. What was your feeling about where Kev and Nick were taking the comic at the time?
Very difficult question to answer. With the benefit of hindsight, which, as we all know, is 20/20 vision, and with a little bit of seeing what was going on at the time, I felt that Nick was getting too close and being over-enthused by Pat.
Right.
And Pat perhaps was going beyond 115% in terms of how far you can take a story, and Nick was getting carried away with that. I got the impression that Kevin was a little bit worried about this and that he could see problems building up. That's about all I can say, really.
Okay. We've already mentioned Alan Grant. Now, he started off as a sub-editor and then helped bring Black Hawk over with was it the sole survivor of Tornado? It was Black Hawk, I think. May not be right, but I'll start again. It's interesting in the same way that Pat encouraged you to write your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You encouraged Alan to move beyond sub-editing and to write his own stuff.
Now, well, I think that was always on the cards.
Right.
I think I was introduced in via John, or possibly Finlay Day, more likely John Wagner.
Yeah.
And was just knocked out straight away. Could see the guy had it in him to do what we needed done on 2000 AD.
Yeah.
It was obvious that he was at heart a writer, and that being a sub, which he'd done before anyway, was a way to get him to do that. And I'm very glad, despite pressure from some points not to take him on, which I resisted intensely.
It's interesting to look at the fact that, Alan came on as a writer, ended up obviously working with John on Just Red.
Yeah, and me. We worked together on a number of one-off dreads.
The Agrodome story together.
Might have done, I can't remember. Alan used to come out to my place in Kent and stay 2 or 3 days, and we'd write 2 or 3 scripts.
Right.
Can't remember what they were. It was one of the things that persuaded me. We were both freelance full-time at the time. One of the things that persuaded me to dish the writing and go for features and production, because I realised I'd never be as good a writer as Al ever was, or John or Pat. But there were far better faces out there than me, and I might as well try something else.
As editor, were you sport for choice, or were you looking for a specific type of artist? Because we've kind of touched on this already, talking about the difference between Ballardinelli and
well, both. Well, yes to both of those, really. Sport for choice in the overall range of artists that we had, but looking for a specific type of talents, particularly for the judge, because the judge had to look right.
Yeah.
A judge drawn by Massimo will be completely different to a judge drawn by Mick.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that we were always trying to do, to get at least discrete, complete stories drawn by one artist. Because otherwise, if you're doing a serial and the artist changes every week, then A, it confuses the reader, but B, commercially, it won't collect into an album at the end of the year. Even though we weren't doing albums, we were trying to budget for the time when somebody would pull their finger out of their ear hole and get on with it and do them. So, we were looking for specific types. And with the judge, you had Carlos and Mick, who were doing that impressionistic version, but you also had John Cooper, Kennedy, when he did a few, didn't he? The really slick shiny ones as well. So you tried to maximise the talents of each individual set of creators, yeah.
Let's turn to after 2008. So you decided to go freelance. You did the Stainless Steel Rat adaptation, various other things. It always struck me that the characters you seem to write were very much in the tradition of Slippery Jim Degrees, the kind of dependable men's men who are a bit slippery. Yeah.
I don't know why I love Slippery Jim so much. It's to an extent, it's a cliche of a character, if you like. No, that's wrong. That's running him down. It's not a terribly surprising character. It's like Raffles, or that other brilliant American series with Robert Loggia in it, Set a Thief to Catch a Thief. It's not called that. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
But it's basically you get a robber to catch robbers. So it's a standard stock character, but Harry did him really quite so well. And it's just amusing. It's fun.
Yeah. It seems to have been kind of quite formative, because you look at something like The Lawless Touch that you wrote for Tornado, which we recently collected.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, and that I don't remember that now. With Barry Tomlinson, no, Barry, not Tomlinson, Barry, the artist.
Great. My brain just said Barry Windsor. Not Barry Windsor.
No, it was Barry something. We got on really well because we were both vehicle fanatics. He was mad, quite mad. He had an old Ford Zodiac or Consul or something that had a record player in it.
Right. A
portable record player. You took your...
How the hell did that work?
Oh, it's huge. It was about this big, and you put your 45 in, and it would play a 45. Okay. But we were both bike and car fanatics, and Mr. Lawless. I was really pissed off with that because whether some details of that got out, I don't know, but it was a purely original thing that I came up with, based to an extent, I suppose, on Slippery Jim. But the television series of the same name came out before we did. Now, there's a lot of crossover went on between telly and what we were doing. I mean, we know that Doug Adams was a great reader, and I know because I went to the effects department to Jim Francis, I think, who did all the effects on Hitchhikers. Yeah. And they used to have our Splinter spreads stuck all over the wall.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, where do you think the Two of Verath came from? Now, I think we were first,
right, because
I think Zaphod came after him. But there were lots of toing and froing, and we didn't mind. And even Jerry Anderson said, we've taken stuff from you, you take stuff from us. It's fine, So I've held the book. Don't panic, it says on the cover.
You've already mentioned how when you walked away from 2000 AD and stopped writing for it, you went to newspapers and that world was essentially gone.
Yeah.
It was lost.
Well, that's the whole nature of newspapers. When I left 2000 AD, I did some writing of strips with Al, but mainly the Judge. A couple of standalones, I think, if I can remember, or Future Shocks. I used to love Future Shocks. They were very difficult to write because a short story is, in my opinion, the most difficult art form in written word because you really got to get it right. And the number of people who try to do a novel in a short story or try to make a short story into a novel, So the Future Shocks were great fun but difficult to do. Then I sort of drifted towards the Europeans because of my connections with Temple art. And I started doing strips for, I say, VNU, which were the Dutch publishers, for a comic called Eppo. And I did one called De Partners, which was a cop duo, one called Root Heart, which was a flying story, and then drifted into doing Storm, 2 stories of Storm with Don Lawrence. I did other stuff over there then. But then the newspaper thing happened. I had been using a computer to write on. So I was a journalist who could turn on a computer without dying of shock. And Eddie Shah was just starting up today.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, Dave Wadmore, and he was quite important in those days as well. David Wadmore, who's now, well, he was the art editor of the Times, I think. He had some stuff to do with 2000 AD, because everyone put ideas in, you know. But anyway, Dave was a good friend of mine. Oh, that's right, we'd done, for the Dutch publishers, we'd done a reprint of a thing called Cake, which is the Dutch word for look, which was the science magazine. It was a popular science magazine done in about 84, 85, which again was 10 years before its time. If you'd brought it out 10, 15 years later, it would have been a huge success. Sure. But it was high quality, good popular science stuff. Sort of thing that Dara Breen does now. That was a test publish over here for 6 months. They didn't make as much money, so it wasn't launched. And I was kicking around wondering what to do. And Dave was working on, he got halfway poached onto, from the Express, I think he was on, and he was tinkering around with Today in Lambeth Bridge Road somewhere. And he said, "You do computers, go and see him." So I just rolled up at the door and said, "Look, I'm a journalist, I can do computers. I understand you're using computers. Want any help?" And it was just amazing good luck, because Brian MacArthur was the editor at the time. I had no appointment, just rolled up there. And it was him I'd gone straight up to. I'd gone straight to the editor of a daily newspaper. And he just happened to be in the foyer. And I literally said, "Look, I'm a journalist, do computers. What do you want doing?" "Oh, come in, dear boy." He took us in. And I was subbing straight away. With perhaps a day or two before I actually started there. But that's what it was like at that time when the newspapers were changing.
Yeah.
So I started as a sub on that in the features department. Then got poached with Amanda Platel was their features editor at the time. She was chief sub. And then she went over to London Daily News, the Bob Maxwell thing, and poached me over there to be a sub on the arts section, which was great fun, really, really good, handling live opera and theatre reviews as they come in. Really incredible pressure. Yeah. Then that folded, and I drifted into the Mirror as a sub, and then onto the People, worked my way up. Somehow became group editor of the Mirror Group.
Right.
And just eventually, after the change of ownership, I got fed up with doing. Well, the worst I did was a 22-hour day, but you were sometimes working 11 days on, 2 days off, and having to go to Canary Wharf as well. I just got fed up with it. We'd been offered the chance to produce a magazine for hotel owners as a freelance packaging job, which we did, which was amazing fun. No money, but my God, the
freebies.
The freebies were great. I mean, a week in Monte Carlo.
Lovely.
Absolutely wonderful. I want to go there and live, or probably die. But no, we got to know a lot of interesting, good people. Louise, my partner, won the new Hotel Writer of the Year competition. We just had a great time. But then, again, management caught up with us, got stiffed by them. I ended up, journalistic-wise, I've missed some bits out, but I can't remember what they were. I've ended up on a defence publisher until that was where I was accused of wanting to beat up a chief sub-editor. But I wasn't, of course. But we parted company after a while, after I'd won them some awards, which they acknowledged I'd actually done. But it was just a politics thing. And as I've said again and again, I don't notice politics when they happen all of a sudden. It was for no small reason that the pub which was the White Hart at the Mirror. Nobody called it the White Hart. It was known as the stab in the back. Everyone could see down the stab, because that's where you got shafted.
Right.
And journalism is like that, which is why I've been in and out of different bits of journalism quite a lot. I never see the knife coming.
I've said this to people like Barry, people like Steve. We've kind of touched on it already. Remarkable period of change, not just in comics, but in journalism as well. So, you know, walking up to a daily newspaper editor and saying, I know computers and getting a job, you know, these days just doesn't happen. What's your feelings about that? What's your feelings about how your career has progressed?
I've had a good time. I've been shafted a few times by management, by people who've never written a creative word in their lives, because they think I'm after their job. That seems to be the problem with management these days. Everyone thinks you're out to take their job away from them, whereas I, and a lot of people like me, just want to get on with doing their writing or subbing or whatever. I've had some great times. I've unfortunately seen journalism, not comic journalism, but ordinary print journalism, go right down the toilet, because the sub-editing and the whole editing process, as a result of what happened with Murdoch and Eddie Shah and all that, threw away the quality and the only word for it is sedulousness, the attention to detail, and the desire to get everything absolutely right has gone completely out the window. The only newspaper these days that comes anywhere near it is The Guardian now, but things like the Mail, the Express, they're just jokes. The quality of writing is bad. The quality of sub-editing is dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. I mean, it was Churchill who said that if you can write as crisply and as well as the people write in the Daily Mirror, then you're a damn good writer. And he was talking about the Mirror from the 50s and 40s, when it was a superb tabloid newspaper. And that was done by the subs, because the writers used to send in any old stuff and the sub-editors would change it round completely and make it work perfectly. And we've seen all that go completely out the window. That doesn't happen anymore. So from the standards of journalism point of view, it's a shame. But I've had a great time doing it. What more can a chap ask?
Well, a huge thanks to Kelvin for spending so much time in my presence at his home on the South Coast. He makes a mean chili, by the way. It was wonderful to hear about his memories of working on 2000 AD back in the early days. Fascinating to see that he was so involved in that process and then just walked away from it and had a career away from the pages of the Galaxy's greatest. So thank you again to Kelvin for taking the time to chat away. Hope you found it as enjoyable as I did. Earthlets, tune in 2 weeks' time when we're going to be hearing from some of the droids involved in the Jumping On issue, Prog 2073. Make sure you head along and pre-order that, or ask your local comic shop to reserve you a copy. Until next time, from the Galaxy's greatest podcast, Splendid Earthlets.
Alert! Fill power levels dangerously high. Alert! Read 2000 AD every week. Ask your comic book store or newsagent now. Subscribe to the Galaxy's greatest comic at 2000ADonline.com. Subscribe digitally on our apps for Apple, Android, and Windows 10. And download DRM free copies from 2000ADonline.com. Alert! Stand by for urgent updates. Search for 2000 AD on Twitter and Facebook. Watch the latest videos at youtube.com/2000 AD online. And follow on Instagram at Insta 2000 AD. Program complete. Shutting down.